Well, in this case, we're going to be talking about the Mosaic Health Code on nutrition. Like I say, I really am, oh my gosh, there's so much here. But we'll just take a little, these are going to be little hors d'oeuvres, I guess we'll put it that way. We're going to have little hors d'oeuvres on them. You ever notice how hors d'oeuvres is spelt? It's funny because my mother always thought that was actually horse divorce. She would have people over, we're going to have horse divorce, and they would always chuckle, never say it in front of her, and us kids were like, Mom, it's hors d'oeuvre. Well, it's spelled like horse divorce. Yeah, anyway, God bless her. So let's get into that, and again, I want to open in prayer just to get the mindset and let God speak to us. Father God, we come before you again and we thank you for this day you've given us. We thank you for the Lord, for the health that you've given us that we can be here doing this. And now, Lord, I just ask again that you do the teaching. Let your word speak to us. Let us see what you say is how for us to stay healthy by what we eat. And just bless our time together here in Jesus' name. Amen. A couple of years ago, probably like 10 or 15. When you get my age, a couple of years ago, it's like 20 years. My family and I went on vacation to go see my family. My family all lives in Florida, what's left of it. And we're going down to Florida. Well, we went one day to Tampa. And I have three little girls, three girls. They weren't little at that time. But so my wife, my three daughters, we went. And of course, my youngest, who was still pretty young at that point, elementary school and stuff, we decided, where should we go to eat? Well, let's go to McDonald's. You all had grandkids, or have grandkids, or you have children. McDonald's, it's not our favorite place to eat, sorry, but it's not. Though I do love McDonald's French fries. I mean, I sometimes crave them. When my wife was pregnant, our first kid, she never had cravings. I would wake up in the middle of the night, I had to have McDonald's. I kid you not. It was terrible. Oh my gosh. It was, I got to have McDonald's. Couldn't be Hardee's, it couldn't be it's got to be McDonald's French fries. So the other day we had a birthday party at a McDonald's for one of my grandkids, and I was craving McDonald's. So I just basically ordered a whole pile of just French fries and sat and just ate French fries. Now you see why I'm so healthy. Now I had a donut on top of that. But we went to this McDonald's. This was really interesting because this does play into this. We went into this McDonald's, and my oldest daughter, who I think was in high school at the time, we go in and we're looking at the menus and stuff, trying to figure out what we're going to get. And the thing is, they had two separate sets of menus. One was in English over on one side. On the other side, it was in Hebrew. And my daughter says, Dad, is that Hebrew? I said, yes, that's Hebrew. And they're like, why is there two different menus like that? I said, we're obviously in a Jewish part of this town. And Jews come here frequently, and they order their stuff. And I said, notice that with the pictures now, because you can read Hebrew, I said, notice there's no cheeseburger. And to kosher food, Jewish food, according to the health code here, you can't put dairy with meat. You can't do that. And so, you can't get that there. But I said the thing is, Jews are a peculiar people, and they have, because they're God's chosen people that gave them the old covenant and stuff, he told them certain things that they could eat and what they couldn't eat, and there you go. This is what's on a Jewish menu. So it's McDonald's with a kosher touch. And she was like, wow, that's really cool. But asking, why is it like that? It's because, and this is in the New Testament. I'm going to take out of the King James here to show you some. But this is, giving a good description of the Jewish people. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. Boy, if you know Orthodox Jews or conservative, they're peculiar compared to most other people. They are. When I take people to Israel and stuff, some of them, in the way that they dress, the way that they act and stuff, they're peculiar people. I don't mean that insultingly. I'm just stating a fact here, which the Bible is correct. They are a peculiar people from everybody else. They do things differently. And it was their Torah law that they try and follow to this day. And That's one reason they are peculiar, is because they were given this law. And since they don't see Jesus as the Messiah, they are still looking for the Mosaic, the Messiah. They are still living by different branches of Judaism, but many of them are living by the Old Covenant, the Old Law, to this day. And so that's why they're a peculiar people, even to us. I mean, Peter wrote this back in the New Testament times, and he was even saying it, that in New Testament times, they're peculiar people. So, but going back, just to give you an idea of why this is so different, it's because God gave his holy people, the people who he chose, he gave them this health code because he wanted them to be healthy. He wanted them to stand out, and they do. They do stand out. Orthodox Jews in particular really stand out in society. And I do not mean that insultingly whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I have great respect for the Jews. I have many, I grew up with Jewish friends. I have Jewish friends in Israel even today, rabbis and stuff that I know, and I have great respect for them. And they are different. They're a peculiar people, but they were set up by God to be the holy people. He could have picked any nation in the world. He chose the Hebrew nation, the descendants of Abraham, as his people. To be, in the Old Testament day, to be his people, gave him his covenant, gave him his laws and stuff like this. And they were different. But if they had followed everything, how different the world would be. Of course, if we followed everything that Jesus said, how different the world would be. But as I said, we're going into the Mosaic Health Code again. Just to remind you, this was written around 1450 BC, somewhere in that range. And it is still in force today. Now, the Jews, back before the Exodus took place, were living in Egypt. So, to understand why God is giving them this health code, we got to understand, first of all, what were they eating before the Exodus? In other words, what were they eating in Egypt? What were Egyptians eating? Now, the Bible does give us a description of this, but let's just think about and look at some of the things that the Egyptians were eating, and thus then the Hebrew people were eating when they were still enslaved, before the Exodus takes place. Now, the Egyptians were eating a lot of grains. The Nile River floods its bank every year, bringing a lot of silt onto the shorelines and stuff, and that's where they plant things. And you can see a picture here of the Nile and how green it is around the Nile, but you get a little ways away and it's like desert. But they ate a lot of foods we know of, like wheat, barley, beans, onions, leeks, rice, potatoes, melons, and for a drink, believe it or not, beer. Beer was the standard drink. And you might think, wow, never thought of that. Well, they produce so many grains. And beer, just to be technical, really simplistic here, but technical, beer is just fermented tea. It's what it is. It's a fermented tea. And archaeologists have shown, though you don't see beer popping up in Bible verses and stuff, archaeology has shown that even the Jewish people throughout Canaan and stuff, even in biblical times and stuff, were drinking beer. Beer was the common man's drink. It was. Though we often talk about wine. Wine was more expensive. Beer was the cheap drink. And to the Egyptians, beer, though they had wine, beer was the common drink that they did. Now, I'm not giving you, now I can go out and drink beer type thing. Personally, I can't stand beer. I'm a tea person. I can't stand beer at all. The only thing good for beer is brats and fish fries on Friday nights. I mean, outside of that, I could care less about beer. But that's how it was. They used to drink this. Now, the Canaanites and the Philistines, the Amorites and stuff, when they came into the Promised Land, they were eating a different type of food. They had these. But you see, Egypt was sort of limited in some aspects with just the area around the Nile to grow their crops. So trade was very, very important for them. They produced a tremendous amount of grains. Canaan, when you get to the land of Canaan, the Canaanites, this other cultures and stuff, they utilized many more foods than what the Egyptians did. We know, for instance, without any shadow of a doubt, the Philistines were very fond of pigs, pork, spare ribs, et cetera, et cetera. They loved pork. We know this from archaeology. You can see bones and stuff, and they've found a lot of this. Pork, of course, is forbidden for the Israelites. God said, you're going in this land, you're not going to eat pork. You're not going to do that. That's not going to be part of your law. But they were eating that. We also know that they ate, some of the Canaanites were very fond of dog. And dog has actually been used, matter of fact, it probably still is used in some Asian countries today. I've never eaten it myself. I think my wife would disown me if I did. But they say it's very tasty. I don't know. But some ate dog also. But pig was a very, very popular food item with the Canaanites. And Israel, this land, when they came in, the land of Canaan, what you're looking at here, this is the Jezreel Valley. You can grow, if you've never been to Israel, you can grow practically any crop in Israel. I mean, if you want to grow bananas, grow bananas. You want to grow mangoes, you can grow mangoes. Grapes, of course, they're everywhere. Melons, yes, you can grow melons. Strawberries, the best watermelon I've ever had in my entire life is in Israel. They have anything. Coconuts, dates. I mean, you name a crop, a type of food crop, even if it's tropical, you can grow it in Israel. And many grain crops have 2 growing seasons in Israel because of the culture. So there is a lot of food that is found there, but they were told to eat certain ones. Now, the reason is God wanted his people to be healthy, to be sanctified, separated for him from the world. That's what he wanted them to do. So, in doing this, it boggles the mind when you read the Mosaic Health Code on nutrition. Nutritionists have even told me that have looked at this. This just literally boggles their mind, just blows their mind. This science that God gave in 1450 BC is so perfect even today. It's amazing. This is cool. I went to the doctor well, that's not cool, but I went to the doctor one time and had to sit in the waiting room. I picked up a Reader's Digest, and I was reading a Reader's Digest, and I came across an article talking about the Mosaic nutritional diet, kosher foods and stuff. And as I read this, there was something fascinating in there that talked about that in New York, the state of New York, and I don't know if it's in other ones, but they give you discounts if you're Jewish in your life insurance because they know you're following the Mosaic Health Code. Thus, they expect you to live longer. So they give you a discount. Even if you're a Gentile and if you swear and sign some document, it was saying in the article, that you're only going to eat a kosher diet, the Jewish diet, you can get a discount. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And they went on to explain, because doctors, physicians, nutritionists all know that if you eat this, generally you're going to be a healthier person than if you eat like donuts and French fries and stuff like that. Anyway, so let's get into this. We're going to take different topics. Again, there's so much here. I'm just barely scratching the surface. There's just no way in an hour we're going to be able to do much more. But let's take a look by different categories. Let's talk about meat to start with. Now, in the book of Deuteronomy, we read in chapter 14, verses 4 through 6. These are the animals you may eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roebuck, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, the mountain sheep, every animal that parts the hoof and has the hoof cloven in two, and choose the cud among the animals you may eat. Why does God specifically narrow those to the foods that we eat, of the meat? Well, there's something these all have in common. If you study these biologically, there's something in common with all of them. Number one, their saliva. The saliva of these animals is all alkaline. That's an important thing to help digest the grains and stuff, because these are all grazers, and they graze, and this helps with their saliva with the digestive process. Second thing, they all have 4 stomachs to digest vegetation, because they eat vegetation. Eating vegetation requires a longer digestive tract, and so you have to have more things to help you break down all the nutrients in there to get the food products, the nutrients out. So they have 4 stomachs. Probably most of you knew that. Another thing that they have in common, their intestines average a length that is almost 30 times their body length. Now, this is fascinating. I will tell you this. Years ago on a marine biology trip, I had a student who came back for a second year as a research student. They do projects. We allow students to come back a second time and do actual research. This student, I don't remember his name, but what his project was he was going to test. He loved to fish. It was an excuse to go fishing. He was going to catch all different varieties of fish, figure out what they ate by dissecting their stomach contents, but then he was going to measure the digestive system in ratio to its length of the animal itself. Now, when he did certain animals that eat like plants and stuff, and algae and things like this, as opposed to like barracuda that are predatory fish on other fish, he found something startling, remarkable, that the grazing type of fish, their digestive system was much longer than the ones, in ratio now we're speaking, to those that are animal predators, fish predators. Because it takes longer and more work to be involved in breaking down the plant material and stuff. So it's just something we see in biology basically straight across. Also, the meats of these animals extremely high in protein, very, very high in protein. Matter of fact, they're so high, some of them are so high in protein and so lean that you have to add some type of fat just to cook it on a griddle. If you've ever tried, I know many of you probably had like filet mignon or something like that and try and cook that on a griddle by itself, just plotting it right on a bare griddle, as opposed to, say, something like a ribeye or a porterhouse, which has a lot of fat in it. The fat renders out and helps the meat to cook, where filet mignon, that doesn't work very well like that. And so it's not as flavorful either to many people. It's high in protein, but because of those differences, it is different. Also, this is fascinating. All of these animals that we are permitted to eat all perspire. Huh? Certain animals do not perspire. Certain animals do not have sweat glands. We take sweat glands for granted. We have them. And why do we have sweat glands? Most common answer I get when I ask this question: to help cool the body. That's partially. No, that is true, but that's not the total thing. That's only a partial answer. Another thing that the sweat glands do, sweat glands are part of your excretory system. They remove metabolic waste. Now, metabolic waste is not digestive waste, like doo-doo and stuff. That's different. Metabolic waste is the waste products made from chemical reactions occurring in your cells. Now, your kidneys take a lot of that out, and they concentrate in what we commonly call urine. But sweat is also filled with some of the same components that you will find in urine, because it's metabolic waste coming out. So there's all sorts of things that are different there, and these animals have sweat glands, so they sweat. The disadvantage is, if you don't have sweat glands, what happens to the metabolic waste? You either just eliminate it all by urine, which you can't, because the muscles scattered throughout your body. You're not going to get rid of all of that if the animal's running around and stuff. The metabolic waste get contained in the meat. I know this doesn't sound nice, but when you eat the meat of animals that are not on this list, there's metabolic waste in the meat, because they can't sweat it out. God knew this because God designed all this. How cool is that? So they eliminate and purge metabolic waste from their muscles. All of these animals do that. And also, very, very important, these animals that we mentioned do not have many parasites. Very few parasites, very few toxins in the way that they live. They're a lot safer to eat. God knew this. Nobody else knew it. God knew it because he created all this. So he told the Hebrew people, these are the animals you eat. You're going to be a lot healthier if you eat this. Now, why did God allow the cloven-hoofed animals? I've been asked that a number of times. Cloven hoof is like, having a toenail, keratin, the same thing your fingernails are made of, and they walk basically on that. If we get down on our hands and knees, or if you're in the habit of going barefoot when in certain places, sometimes we get cuts on our feet. If we did it on our hands, walking around all the time on our hands and our knees will get cuts and stuff. Our hands, the palms of our hands, because we don't have that kind of thing. Protection there, this keratin nail, if you will. We get cuts and stuff, we get infections, and thus we can get parasites. Hookworm, for instance, in southern part of the United States, hookworm is very, very common. Why? Because in the feet, it drills, these little tiny worms drill holes through your skin, in between your toes, and enter your body, and you get parasites this way. That's how you get hookworm, most common way of getting it. And so, having cloven feet, they have these big, thick keratin nails that are walking on the hard substance. They're not going to get cut and get infected very easily, and so it is much safer. It's a way of not getting parasites in your body. Isn't that cool? Now, who would have thought of that? We know this today in science, but back then, who would have ever thought of this? They wouldn't have thought of this. But God, because he is so brilliant in what he is doing and the way he knows his creation, that's what he did. So since we're talking on this, what animals were then forbidden? Well, he gives us a list of those too. In certain parts of the Bible, I'm just picking one here. In Leviticus chapter 11, verses 3 through 8, we read, "Whatever parts the hoof and is cloven hoofed and chews the cud among the animals you may eat. Nevertheless, among those that chew the cud or part the hoof, you shall not eat these. The camel, because it chews the cud, but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. The rock badger, because it chews the cud, but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. The hare, because it chews the cud, but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. The pig, because it parts the hoof and is clove-foot, but does not chew the cud, is unclean for you. You shall not eat any of their flesh. You shall not touch their carcasses. They are unclean." You see, unclean animals for the Israelites, they were forbidden from eating these things or even touching them because they often carry parasites. So these included just roughly what we just read. It talked about camels. It talked about rabbits, horses, bears, squirrels. We can include into this list if you look more. Possum. I mean, Granny on Beverly Hillbillies, they ate a lot of possum. It's not a good thing to eat. It's not. I can tell you, it's not a good thing to eat. It's very greasy and pathetic tasting. Cats, dogs, rodents, and pig. You're not supposed to eat these. Give you another little article here out of Reader's Digest. This is interesting. Reader's Digest issue, March 1950, Dr. Laird Goldsborough states, quote, "In the flesh of a pig, the trichina," stop here, trichina are parasitic worms. Trichina are often so minute and so nearly transparent that to find them, even with a microscope, is a task for expert scientific inspectors. Remember this, when you see stamped on a pork product the words U.S. government inspected and passed, those words do not mean that any official inspection, whatever has been made as to whether this pork has trichinosis or not. It merely passes the routine inspection given for meat in general, unquote. So, who ate bacon this morning? Okay, pork chops, ham, and stuff like that. Oh yeah, we got hands up with ham. Okay, yeah. Give you another one here, talking about trichinosis, this type of worm. The New York, I didn't even know this existed until I researched this. The New York Trichinosis Commission. Now, if you have a commission, that means there's got to be a lot of this going around for them to organize a group to monitor this. So the New York Trichinosis Commission even states that physicians, get this, physicians have misdiagnosed many ailments, including alcoholism and typhoid, which were in fact caused by trichinosis, these parasitic worms. Sometimes even an arm, leg, or back pain, arthritis, and even rheumatism is actually caused by trichina worms. Now, I'll tell you, when I was taking a class in college called parasitology, I don't think anybody in that class, any of us, ate pork for like 6 months. We would look at tissue under the microscope and we're like, oh my gosh, you know, I mean, it turned us off to pork. There was a number of foods we just stopped. Pigs, since we're talking about pigs here, and they get trichinosis a lot. Pigs eat practically anything. Those of you who've ever grown up on a pig farm or had pigs around you, they eat anything from grain to dead animals. I have an uncle that, well, he's dead now, but he was a pig farmer in southern Illinois, and his pigs would eat anything. Dead raccoon falls out of the tree or whatever, pigs are eating it. Dead coyote that he shot in the pig area where he had it on his farm. The pigs ate it. They'll eat anything, including the feces of other animals and their own feces. Pigs are filthy beasts. I mean, you ever look at a pig? Some people would say, oh, they're so ugly, we should eat them because they're so ugly. God is saying, no, stay away from these. I made them ugly so you wouldn't be attracted to eat these things. Pigs also retain a lot of toxin in their meat. Did you know that? They do not possess sweat glands. I don't know where we got this expression, wow, I'm sweating like a pig. Where did that come from? Obviously not a pig farmer. They don't sweat because they don't have sweat glands. So what happens? The metabolic waste in their bodies, in the meat and stuff, stays inside of the meat. The majority of it, I mean, yes, they do urinate, but not all of the metabolic waste gets out that way. Thus, when you eat good old New Year ham or whatever, big old slice of spiral ham, have a ham sandwich, go to Cousins, get a ham sandwich, you're eating meat that does have a higher level of metabolic waste in it. Now, if it doesn't bother you, go ahead and eat it. To a Jew, you're not going to get me to eat that. That is the most disgusting thing to Jews and stuff. Oh, I'm going to, I don't know if anybody's going to want to go out and eat after this. Let's talk about seafood. This one really gets me. I can live without pig. I mean, I could live without pork for a long time. But seafood, I used to live in the Bahamas. I'm used to, when I was a kid down there, and even when my wife and I were living down there, we had a boat. We would go out to the different islands and stuff, be the only people on an island. And a lot of times we're eating, she never would do this. I would take conch, the big, beautiful pink shells, and just take them out of the shell and eat them raw. I've eaten what we call polyplacophorans or chitons. In the Bahamas are called curbs, little mollusks. I would just peel them off a rock and just take the muscle foot out, cut it out, and just dip it in seawater and eat the thing. So I have no idea what's living in me. I know the Holy Spirit's in there, but I don't know about anything else. But seafood, oh my gosh, Lord, really? Because it says in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 9 and 10, of all that are in the waters, you may eat these. Whatever has fins and scales, you may eat. And whatever does not have fins and scales, you shall not eat. It's unclean for you. Isn't it clear? I mean, moray eel and eels in general. I had a cooking teacher who used to love to make for breakfast eel on toast. He had some really weird things that he did. But that's what it said. Look at another verse here. In Leviticus chapter 11, verse 9. These you may eat, all that are in the waters, everything in the water that has fins and scales, whether in the sea or in the rivers, you may eat. There's a lot of fish that you can get in stores around here no Jew would pick up and touch. And there's reasons for it. Mollusks, just talking about mollusks like clams, oysters, and stuff like that. Most mollusks they're all forbidden, but most of them are scavengers. I mean, some are filter feeders, like an oyster, a clam, a mussel. Snails, anybody love to eat snails? Escargot? Little snails, putting in calcium in case, what a snail is a calcium encased slug. And I think more people like to eat snails for the garlic butter that they're cooked in. And, you do. I see that a lot of people here do not seem to like snails, so we'll move on. But snails, conch, things like that, these are going around, they scavenge is what they eat. They eat dead, dying organisms. Those that filter feed, well, there's fish going to the bathroom constantly in the ocean. The filter feeders eat that, and that's then what we eat if we eat them. When we eat an oyster or a clam, like oysters in the half shell, do you realize you're eating the digestive organs of this with their feces intact? On a marine biology trip, we used to go to a restaurant that had all-you-can-eat oysters. We had students that used to have these little contests. How many can eat the oyster? Actually, it became like a ritual for many years. I had to stop it because people were all like, okay, everybody has to eat an oyster. All these people from the Midwest never seen an oyster. Now they have to eat one. And you don't chew an oyster. You just let it slide down. You wish it around your mouth, you slide it down. It's like, pardon me, but it's like eating a ball of snot. You put like, I'm not being too graphic, am I? Or am I being too subtle? But those kind of things, we would see these students actually swallow these things down. In some cases, they came right back up, but it was really disgusting. But that's what these are. Or, oh my gosh, my favorite food. I often get asked by people, what's your favorite food? My favorite food in the whole world is lobster. Actually, not this type of lobster. This is like a Maine lobster. I like the spiny lobsters you find in the Bahamas, sometimes called crawfish down there. But something weird with lobster, prawns, crustaceans, shrimp, crabs, things like this. God designed them in a really weird way. Now, their exoskeleton, they have their skeleton on the outside of their body, so their internal organs are all inside that. But they have an organ that's called the hepatopancreas. It's a gland, helps them to digest their food and stuff. When a lobster or a shrimp dies, or a crab, the moment it dies, the hepatopancreas gland starts to secrete enzymes into the body of the animal, into the muscle tissue and everything, which starts to break it down. Thus, the beginning portions of spoilage begins, right when they die. And being that the hepatopancreas sits right alongside the digestive system and also the meat that we love to consume, it sits right by that. These enzymes go into the meat. And they didn't have any refrigeration on this camping trip that they took in the Sinai, so and across the deserts and stuff, these Hebrew people. So God said, you don't eat this. And even when you get to Canaan, there's no refrigeration. You don't eat these things. You have no way of stopping it. Today, lobster fishermen and stuff like this, when they catch them, if you've ever watched like on YouTubes and stuff or on TV shows, they take the lobsters, they immediately put them and freeze them. They freeze them, try and freeze them as fast as they can. If they don't, you see what's now happening. You can't see it occurring, but the spoilage has already started. And that's why sometimes people have certain reactions to some of these crustaceans when you eat them, because it prompts a bacterial explosion inside of their flesh. So eating a live lobster is better than eating one that has been dead. I mean, if you take it alive, not eating the live thing, that's a little gross. But I don't even think I've done that. But taking a live lobster and killing it instantly and cooking it, that's safer than catching one and letting it sit there for a couple of hours or whatever, or getting one and it thaws out or whatever. These enzymes are going to start breaking down. Let's talk about fish, since we're on these. There were two types of fish that were described in the Mosaic Health Code. Ones that had fins and scales. These are kosher. These you are allowed to eat. Others are forbidden. Why are they forbidden? Like a catfish, for instance. Catfish and some of these others eat dead things. They also, in many cases, they live along the bottom and they scavenge eating things on the bottom. They take in the silt, the mud and stuff into their mouth. It goes in with their meal, and if there's toxins in the meat, or in the soil, which often there is, even in lakes and in the ocean, it goes into their flesh. So God said, no. He knew ahead of time, no, you don't do this. You don't eat these things. So I don't know who in here is really partial to catfish. Catfish, one of the filthiest things to eat. I mean, biologically on fish, they're a bad thing because they scour off the bottom. My dad loved catfish, and they'll eat almost anything. I remember one time fishing with my dad for channel cats, and my dad used to smoke cigars when he was younger, and he was running out of bait. They were biting so well, he took the cigar stub out of his mouth, put it on the hook with a weight, dropped it down. He caught a 20-inch cat. Cat came out smoking a cigar. That's a partially true story. It wasn't smoking the cigar, but it did eat the cigar, and he caught it. I mean, they'll eat anything, catfish. So what should we eat? Cod, bass, perch, tuna, salmon, trout, halibut, smelt. These are all having scales and stuff. And the thing is, they are also high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are very good for us. They're also extremely high in protein, in vitamins, and in minerals. I love that. So when you go to your fish fries, I love to get cod. Some people do walleye, some people do perch and stuff. These are good fish because they have fins and they have scales. These also, as we were talking about the digestive system, they have a longer digestive system, which allows for better absorption. And then fewer toxins that way also. Their digestive system is encased in a membrane that separates their digestive system from the muscles. So what we have, I was talking about like with crustaceans, does not happen with this type of fish. Let's talk about poultry. Wow, God had a lot to say on this one. There is a lot here. Let's talk about from Leviticus chapter 11, verses 13 through 19, what God is saying among the birds we can eat and what we can't. And it reads, "And these you shall detest among the birds." In other words, he's saying, don't eat this. "They shall not be eaten. They are detestable. The eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon, any kind, every raven of any kind, ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, the cormorant, the short-eared owl, the barn owl, the tawny owl, the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, the hoopoe, and the bat." Now, I don't know who's thinking, wait a minute, bat's not a bird. How many times I've been approached by people that don't believe in the Bible, and they say that there's scientific errors in the Bible, and they'll point this passage out to me. And they'll say, because it says, among the birds, and then the last thing it mentioned is a bat. Bats don't have feathers. They are not avian. Birds are avian. Bats are mammals. It's a flying rodent. So they're different, they say. So God made a mistake here. No, they didn't. God did not make a mistake because you're reading an English translation. If you go back to the Hebrew, where it says up at the top here, you shall detest these among the birds, the actual Hebrew word here is the word for flying animal. English translators, in most translations, just translate flying animals to be birds. It's not the same thing. It's the word oaf in Hebrew. Oaf is not that. Oaf is a flying animal. So a bat is a flying animal. That's why it states that. That's not an error in the Bible, no. So the clean birds, what are we allowed to eat? Somebody got the list of what we shouldn't. We can eat chicken. You go to Israel, you eat a lot of chicken. Turkey, pheasant, duck, geese, quail, pigeon, grouse. These are good. These are good. A lot of times go hunting for these kind of things. They have a very, very long digestive tract. Body ratio we're looking at here. Thus, they contain very, very few toxins. The longer your digestive tract, the fewer the toxins in your flesh. Most clean birds also consume what? Grains. By eating grain, you're reducing pathogens. The animals we mentioned before, those things are eating dead animals. You ever see ravens and stuff sitting on the side of the road eating dead animals? So, no, there's by eating grains, you have less toxin, less diseases and stuff like this. Unclean birds, no, they feed on the dead. They feed by scavenging. They feed on rotting flesh. And because of this, they accumulate toxins and pathogens in their body and inside their muscles. And some on the list of these things are also incubators. Many of these birds that are not clean are literally incubators for growing bacteria and viruses. So we shouldn't eat that kind of stuff. It was forbidden totally. And even most people don't eat those, even who are not Jewish. Bats, as we already said, bats are on this list, even though they're not birds, they're a flying animal. Bats also have a very short digestive system, very short. And they've been known to harbor many, many parasites and pathogens, including rabies. Bats, we have a shortage because of a disease that went around, a fungal disease that killed off many of the bats in this state. But just being in caves where there's a lot of bats, the feces, the aerosol from this feces and stuff can actually make you sick. So bats are really filthy, filthy creatures. Let's talk about insects, which bats eat. Oh yeah, wouldn't you like that? Sit down in a restaurant and have a plate of crickets. Yes. Well, God says you can eat certain insects. Let's look at Leviticus chapter 11 again, verses 2. we're not going to go through all 23. I shouldn't meant to change part of this. All winged insects that go on all fours are detestable to you. Yet among the winged insects that go on all fours, you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet, with which to hop on the ground. Of these you may eat, here's the list. You can eat locusts of any kind. You can eat the bald locust of any kind. You can eat crickets of any kind. You can eat grasshoppers of any kind. But all other winged insects have 4 feet and are detestable to you. Isn't that wild? Clean insects, as it says, grasshoppers, locusts, crickets. Do you know that outside of the United States, most countries, insects make up a bulk of their diet? We're one of the few countries in the world that do not serve insects regularly. And the number one insect on menus and stuff across the world, beetles. Beetles make up over 81%. Of all of the insect species, beetles are the number one thing. Which surprised me when I found that out, because I would have thought crickets or grasshopper would have been higher, but beetles are the highest. And the thing is, they generally don't carry a lot, these that are clean do not carry a lot of parasites and stuff like that. They don't drink blood, they don't use venom, they don't have certain chemicals that make them taste nasty. I have only eaten a couple of insects in my life, but when I was working at Fort Wilderness, one of the last years I was there, we did an edible insect class where I bought a bunch of insects and we had people come in and we actually cooked them and ate them in class. We made suckers, so I showed them how to make a sucker lollipop type thing, and we put like mealworms, and which is a type of beetle, put that in there, and we had crickets and stuff like that you could put in there, and you could eat these things. And the kids at first were a little repulsive, and then they're like, wow. And some were just taking the things out of the bowls and just eating them before the class is over. They're like, wow, it's sort of a nutty taste and sort of sweet. I remember one person saying, yeah, it's sort of sweet. Oh, it's sort of nutty. It tastes like a nut. Yeah, but you roast them. I have dissected, as a biologist, I've dissected many insects over the days, and I have sometimes come across a few grasshoppers or locusts and crickets that have had some worms in them, but the type of worm that's in there, if you roast it and cook it thoroughly through, you kill it and its eggs, so it's totally harmless for you to eat it. And we're supposed to roast these, and so it's a good thing if you want to go out and get crickets. They're very high in nutrition. Very high in protein. They're a great food, and maybe someday the United States will be forced to start serving them in restaurants. I don't know. Imagine going and getting some crickets on your Big Mac or something like that. Wow. Well, we put fried onion rings and French fries on and stuff. Well, yeah. Let's go to dairy. Oh, I love this one too. I love cheese. I'm a cheese fanatic. I eat way too much cheese. My mom used to eat, I'm not lying here, my mom would easily eat a half a pound to a pound of cheese a day. And that's not what killed her. So that was her comfort food. And she just, pictures of my mom sitting on the sofa watching television and eating cheese. That was her. Well, in Numbers chapter 14, verse 8, look what God says here. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and given to us a land that flows with milk, dairy. Even to this day, when I go to Israel, those of you who have not been to Israel, when you go to Israel and you go to a restaurant in Israel, a Jewish restaurant in particular, there is a ton of cheese. Lots of cheese to eat. Lots of breads. Also salad. Salad's a big thing in Israel for breakfast. But they do. All different types of salads. And eggs. I love the different cheeses. They have just a cheese bar often, and I just go there and I'm just, oh my gosh, I want that one, and that one. And I take some, wrap them up in a napkin, and I take them off when I'm going out to some site or something. I have cheese with me that I can eat. I love cheese. And a few decades ago, if you might remember, it was taught to us from the federal government that eating cheese was very bad for your health. That it led to heart disease, weight gain, arthritis, all this stuff by eating cheese and dairy. I remember my mother coming home from the doctor after a checkup numerous times, and how'd it go? Well, he told me to stop eating cheese. Well, that's not going to happen, is it, Mom? Nope. I love it. But now this has pretty much been debunked. I mean, you got to think too, moderation. Don't get up in the morning, eat 4 pounds of cheese every single day. That's not what God designed for us. But cheese every morning is not, or throughout the day, it's not bad. It's actually very good. It's very high in protein, and a lot of other nutrients, calcium and other things. It's very, very good for us. So we're allowed to eat dairy. Fats. I love that picture. When I put that picture on there, I was like, man, I could eat some bacon. And my first thought was, trichinosis. Because when I would eat bacon up at Fort Wilderness, some people, like my wife, likes to eat her bacon where it's so crisp, you put it in your mouth, you might bite down, and it just shatters like glass. I studied French cuisine. I am mostly French. And so we French, we like to eat things raw. So I love bacon that is warm all the way through, but you can pick it up and hold it to your ear and you can hear, an oinking. I mean, I like it soft and chewy. So, and every time we have bacon at home, when we do eat it, my wife always apologizes, says, well, I made it crispy, I'm sorry. It's hard to make it the way you want it because you just basically want it warmed up. So, yeah, like I say, who knows what's all inside me. But here's what God says about fats. And oh my God, we could make, literally, I'm going to have to skim this fast. Fats are so well discussed in the Bible with so many verses. There's so much scientific information about them. It would take us literally about 3 or 4 weeks, an hour a day, easily, at least an hour a day, and I don't even know if we would finish in 4 weeks, talking about fats. There's so many different types of fats. There's so many things, different types of fats that we have and what they're composed of, the molecular structure of them and stuff, all makes a difference. There's so much here. So basically, this is what God told the Israelites with the Mosaic Health Code back in 1450. This is what he says. You shall eat no fat of ox or sheep or goat. The fat of an animal that dies of itself and the fat of the one that is torn by beasts may be put to any other use, but on no account shall you eat it. For every person who eats of the fat of the animal of which a food offering may be made to the Lord shall be cut off from his people. So God was really serious about certain fats and stuff. And simply put, what is fat? Fats are just large chemicals, a form of a triglyceride. They have a glycerol molecule and usually these long chains of fatty acids. And they can be saturated or supersaturated or unsaturated, having to do with how the hydrogens attach with the carbons and stuff. It's really confusing. And we're not going to have time to go through a fat lesson here because there's just so much involved here. So let's just make it extremely simple. God does approve using fats, certain fats. But we need to be careful with how much we eat. Again, moderation is very important. One problem of consuming animal fats is that some animals, for instance, pork, will store toxins in its muscle tissue, which when you render the fat, it goes there also. Do you know, I remember reading this back in the 1980s, that there was a study that was done after DDT in this country was illegal. They never did this anymore, never used it. Yet, they started taking people who were older when they died, and they autopsied their bodies, and they took fat, the adipose tissue, the fat cells, out of their body. And then they analyzed it for DDT. And they found DDT in the fat cells of all these people. Even though DDT had been outlawed for over a decade, people still had it in them. Why? It's because we store many of the toxins like that in our fat cells. That's where it sits. And hopefully it just sort of stays there and it's stuck there. Might be one way of God sort of protecting us, putting it in the fat cells and it just stays there. But when a person then utilizes the fat cells, starvation and stuff, some of these toxins then can be released into your body. But fat is really interesting like that. So toxins are often stored in fat molecules. It's just really weird that it's like that. Some harmful chemicals. I know I got this picture of a ribeye here, but the thing is there's a lot of fat here. Fat does taste good. We just got done eating some of this donuts, which was cooked in fat. we got to be careful. Now, they used to say back after, was it President Eisenhower, after he had a heart attack, the medical department stated that some of you that are older will remember that fats, they tried to get all fats out of our body, stop eating fats, no ice cream, no things, anything with fat in it, get rid of it, and because they said it would cause heart disease and stuff. Well, certain fats are worse than others, just to make it simple. Certain fats are very, very bad for you, others not so bad. Olive oil, like the Mediterranean diet and stuff, that's a good fat. Avocado fat, the fats in an avocado, that's a good type of fat. So there's bad fats, there's good fats. Pork fat is not considered really a good fat. Though, when I was in college, I worked 2 years in the kitchen making breakfast at the university, and every single day we made either a whole pile of sausage or a whole pile of bacon. But we kept all the fat because part of my job was at the end of the day, we would take the trays of all the fat and pour it into a big stainless steel bin, which is what we cooked everything in. We used to say that they used to tell you that lard was really bad for you, use shortening instead. Now science has shown it's sort of reversed in some ways. Some shortenings, plant shortenings even, are really not good for you. There are some bad plant fats, there are some bad animal fats, but things with moderation, that's the thing. Because fats tend to build up in certain areas of our body. I know that is not a picture of me. But they build up, and they can also build up in our blood vessels, certain ones that can help clog certain blood vessels, leading to heart attacks and stuff. But we got to be careful with the type of fat. Like I say, the type of fats that you see the Jews eat and stuff, that is very good fat. The Mediterranean type diet fats and stuff, those are good. God said, though, to stay away from most of the animal fats, bad ones in particular, because eating that is not good for you. Olive oils and other plant oils, certain ones, are very good for you. Thing is, they're more expensive, but they are good. Just again, in moderation. So I wish there's just not time. I mean, we'd have to go through, even when I used to teach in anatomy and physiology, I used to teach about nutrition, I would spend like a whole week basically just on fats and the different things, because there's so much involved in all that. We just don't have time in the short period we have left here. But let's talk about one of my sweeter subjects. Let's talk about honey and sweeteners that the Bible talks about. You know, the Bible mentions these two. They do. And honey, honey is really becoming very popular again today. It was really popular in the old days because sugar, what we call, table sugar, sucrose, is made primarily from like sugar cane or sugar beets and stuff like this, but it's a processed food. There are natural sugars that are out there. Honey is one of these. Maple syrup is another one of these. Both of those, honey and maple syrup, are both kosher. They're both allowed by God. God says, eat these are good for you. And they are. Honey is one of the better things to eat. Honey is a fascinating food when you study it because it doesn't spoil. Honey, which is mentioned frequently in the Bible, many passages, and Jews are eating it, so we know God blesses this. Natural honey contains thiamine, riboflavin, biotin, niacin, a small amount of vitamin C, many trace elements. The sugar in honey is, in natural honey we're talking about here, 40% of that sugar is fructose, 34% is glucose, less than 2% sucrose, which is the table sugar. Fructose and glucose don't need to be digested. They're already totally digested. They go right into your bloodstream. You want quick energy? I remember telling this to my students one time right before a football game. I said, you guys really want quick energy? I said, eat a bunch of honey because you don't have to digest it. So the kid, I didn't tell them to do this. They went home or came back to school or whatever with containers full of honey. And then as they're suiting up to play football, they're just... They went out there. The first quarter was great. They were all like, ah! Second quarter comes along, they were all like, ah. Next time they had class, that was on Friday. Monday they come in and they're just yelling at me like, what in the world? That was the most disaster. We got beat so bad. I said, I didn't tell you to do that. I said, it's quick energy, but no, you're playing a whole football game. So then I had a student, this was in the Bahamas, I had a student who decided, oh, I'm just going to use glucose. So the day before a big track meet, this student, his name was Harl went to the pharmacy and he bought a 5-pound bag of glucose. White powder. Brought it back to school before the track meet. They're eating this white powder by the handful. Some of the kids don't even know what it is. He says, it's just sugar, just eat it. It's good for you. It's going to give you really good energy because Mr. Lane said it would really help you and we'll do great and stuff like this. So they're eating, they ate the whole 5-pound bag. Coach out there, the coaches could not get the kids to settle down before the meet. Kids are going nuts. They did break a couple of school records right at the beginning. But then afterwards, they had no energy and they knew something was going on. So he starts questioning some of the students, and it comes out that a white powdery substance was being passed around in the locker room before the event. They finally get this, the police were called and everything, and because they didn't know what the white powder was. And Harl wasn't talking. And when the police came, he sort of breaks down, and finally he tells them it was just glucose, and somebody in there, some adult asked Harl, like, where did you get such a stupid idea to do that? The biology teacher, Mr. Lane, told us. I had the police at my door. Really did. Did you tell them I said, I didn't tell them that. I just said that it's pure, it doesn't have to be digested because glucose goes right into your system. If you want sugar into your body really quick, honey is a great one because it's fructose and glucose primarily, and that just goes right into your bloodstream. Really something. It's referred to often, even today I hear this frequently, it's the perfect natural food source because of the nutrients in it, and it doesn't spoil. Honey from 800 years ago can still be sitting in a jar and you can eat it. It doesn't spoil. And there are some honeys that can help fight bacterial infections. Not all honey does that. You can't go to the grocery store, you can't go to Piggly Wiggly, buy a thing of Subi honey, pour that on a massive cut and expect to get better. There are certain honeys, most of them are from New Zealand, that have been studied that do possess antibiotic quantities in them and capabilities, but not all honey is like that. And you have to make sure that the honey you get is pure honey too. But honey is a very good thing. God says, eat honey to use that. You can use that instead of sugar. Use maple syrup if you want. Both of them are kosher. Nuts. Do you know God even talks about nuts to the Israelites and telling them what you can eat and what you can't? In Genesis chapter 43, verse 11, get this. Do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bag. Notice he says, pistachio nuts and almonds. God specifically mentions, hey, you want to be healthy? Take pistachio nuts and eat them, and almonds and eat those. Isn't it interesting? He doesn't say this about peanuts or some of the other things like cashews. Actually, peanuts and cashews are not even nuts. Peanuts are related to the bean family, and cashews are actually the part of a flower. The flower is actually poisonous. Really interesting. Anyway, let's talk about almonds first. Almonds help regulate dopamine. Oh, we love dopamine. In our brains, dopamine helps the brain to develop. It helps it to function. It helps sharpen your memory. Probably all of us could use a dose of almonds right now. And it helps you with your moods. In a bad mood, eat a bunch of almonds. They also help in some people, this is still being studied, that they help with cholesterol levels. Wow, cool. My favorite, I do love eating almonds. I had almonds this morning when I got up. I love pistachios. Pistachio is my favorite nut. And they are loaded with unsaturated fatty acids. This is a good type of fat. Antioxidants, and they help prevent inflammation. You got achy joints and stuff like this? Try eating some pistachios. It's really beneficial. It's a great thing. Blood. This one surprised me a little bit, but God talks about using blood as a food product. In Leviticus chapter 7, verses 26 and 27. Moreover, you shall eat no blood whatever, whether of fowl or of animal, in any of your dwelling places, whoever eats any blood, that person shall be cut off from his people. God was very specific, you don't eat blood. Now, here in this country, we don't consume blood very often. I took cooking lessons when I was younger. I took French cuisine. And I was mortified one day when our cooking instructor was teaching us about thickeners to use in different type of meals and stuff, different dishes we're making. And she said, blood is a really good one. So we cooked one day with blood. I think it was sheep blood or something like that, but we put blood in there, thickened the meal, yes. In French cuisine, you sometimes do that. I was like, this is disgusting. I mean, blood? But there are people in this country, I do know some, that do pour blood into some of their things that they make and some of the foods that they do process and stuff. Now, the problem with this, obviously if God says don't do it, there's got to be some type of problem. Science has found, yes, there is a problem. There are many parasites, many parasitic diseases that you find in blood. Many pathogens that make us sick are found in our blood. Most of us know this today, that if blood is from another person is inserted into you, it can make you sick. True story. Back in the I think this was in the early 1980s, I think this happened. It was in Florida. A science teacher at a school decided he was going to have the students take out their microscopes and look at their own blood under the microscope, put it on a slide. Now, I have standardly done this in many labs in the past too, but he did something different. I would use sterile little lancets and stuff. What this guy did is he took a cotton ball, dipped it or poured isopropyl alcohol on it, just rubbing alcohol, and he took a big dissecting needle, one of those with a wooden handle, big, long, thick gauge needle on the thing. And what he did is he wiped it off with the needle, with the cotton swab with alcohol, went over and poked one student, wiped it, poked another student, wiped it, poked another student, wiped it, and he went through his whole class of about 30 students like this. A few days later, the whole class came down with hepatitis. The medical facilities were called and talked about, and they did an investigation, and they traced it that all these students were in this guy's lab. What did you do? And he says, I did not do anything that could cause that because I took a needle, but I wiped it in alcohol in between and poked each student. It just so happened the first student he poked had hepatitis. And then he just transferred hepatitis to all of his students that way. And he couldn't understand. He says, I thought that alcohol sterilizes. Anybody here a nurse or a doctor? We all know the little alcohol swab that they put on you or wiping something with alcohol like that real quick, it does not sterilize. In microbiology, when we used to teach that, no. Alcohol will, but you got to have the certain strengths of alcohol, and it has to soak in alcohol. So literally, to be honest, if you take a little thing of, a little packet of rubbing alcohol, you have to give yourself an injection or something like that, and you just wipe it, or if someone comes, they just wipe it like that. Basically, they're just taking a little bit of the dirt off your skin. They're not sterilizing it. They're still, I have actually tested this with my microbiology students where we did this, and then we sampled the skin right afterwards, found all sorts of bacteria, all sorts of stuff on there. It doesn't. So when that teacher did that, he was not sterilizing the needle, he was just wiping it off. But yeah, he lost his teaching license for it. But because, true, blood carries pathogens. If you have a pathogen, it can be transferred very easily like that. That's why in many bathrooms today now we have these things to drop for drug addicts and stuff, or people who have diabetes to drop their syringes in, because it is so dangerous if we cross-contaminate with blood. Blood also contains metabolic waste. We've already talked about how dangerous that can be and how bad that is for us. If the animal's hosting, you take the blood from, I mean, gee, there's a lot of things. God was so correct. Don't drink blood. Though the pagans at that time, many of the Canaanites and stuff and the Philistines were actually drinking blood in rituals having to do with their religion. You don't do that. That's what God's saying. And he's telling us, don't drink blood. Let's go to roadkill. Are you kidding? Roadkill's in the Bible? It is. It really is. I'm not making this up. in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 14, verse 21, you shall not eat anything that has died naturally. You may give it to the sojourner with who is in your town. He may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner, but you, my chosen people, you don't eat it. I don't know, has anybody ever eaten roadkill? I used to have a cookbook, recipes for roadkill. I don't know whatever happened to it. I had it when I was teaching in the 90s. I was one time coming home from work, from teaching, and there was a car in front of me. We're going down this road in this farm area, and a whole pile of pheasants flew across, got up and tried to fly across the road. The car in front of me and my car, we wiped a ton of them out. I mean, there's just birds flying everywhere that we hit. He drove on. Well, these are all pheasants, freshly killed. I saw it, but I just went around the side of the road. I parked my car, got out. Oh, I'm smashed beyond repair. This one's just got a broken neck. Threw it in the back of the car. Ooh, this one's got a broken neck. Threw it in the back of the car. I brought home pheasants. When I got home, my wife is like, what took you so long? I said, well, I brought a bunch of pheasants. Look. And she's like, what are you going to do with those? I said, we're going to eat them. Oh, you're going to eat them. I'm not going to eat them. Well, there was nothing wrong with them. They're roadkill, but I saw how they got killed. And the thing is, I did serve them to my Sunday school teacher and his wife when they came over. Really funny story, because they said, wow, pheasant. I haven't had pheasant in a long time. Did you get these hunting? No. Did you buy these in the store? No. This is after the meal. Somebody give them to you? No. Where'd you get them? The side of the road. Oh, yeah. This is talking about animals that you just see on the side of the road or whatever, or you're walking through a field, you see, oh, wow, here's a deer. Well, I'm going to take it home and eat venison. To the Jews, you're not allowed to do that. If it dies like that in a way you did not see, it died naturally as far as you know, there's no arrow stuck in it, no, you can't do that. No, you don't. It's interesting that God says, sell it to the Canaanites, but don't you eat it. I don't know. Was God chuckling when he said that? But we don't know what killed the animal. It could have been bacterial. It could have been viral. It can be transferred to people. God knows this. They didn't know about bacteria and viruses and stuff. God knew, and he's telling them, don't eat this stuff. So this information was totally unknown in the ancient world, yet God knew it. How accurate the Bible is. Beyond what science was saying for a long time. But as we said at the beginning, we talk about and focus a lot on creation, dealing with the opening books of the Bible. The thing is, there's a lot in here also that is shown to be true by scientific evidence. The Mosaic Health Code was not only the first major health code ever written in human history, but it seems to have been made supernaturally because it went against everything. What I told you with the Egyptians and what they were doing in medicine and nutrition, this goes against everything. No one understood bacteria. No one understood viruses. They had no idea. God knew. And it wouldn't be until modern times, and even today, we're still learning how accurate the Bible is on this. Fascinating. And like I say, we have just scratched the surface on this. Father God, I thank you so much for this time we've had, and I ask that, Lord, we look at your word not as some book, but when we open up our Bibles and gaze in them, in a way we're actually gazing into your face because we can hear and read what you have told us. You spoke it. It's written down. How accurate you were. How brilliant. Even in the terms of modern science, it's just baffling how this code written around 1450 BC is so perfect. And we thank you, because your word is true. God bless us all. Keep us safe and healthy, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.